Welcome into the DNVR Avalanche Podcast. We got the whole squad here. AJ, Megan on the ends, Rudo, Eric in the middle. Avs did a thing in September. Someone was saying it was the exact same day. They signed Erod on the 12th.
Yep.
They signed Tomas Tatar for a 1-year, $1.5 million deal.
Almost to the minute.
I want to start with this. He was at a captain's practice immediately. So does that indicate that this deal was kind of a done deal a couple days ago?
He was on the same flight as Miles Wood coming in. He's just unpacking.
Just hitched the ride from New Jersey. This is good to go.
So funny you mentioned him, because Miles Wood, because when I was watching Tatar stuff yesterday, Miles Wood just kept popping up like all over the place, like randomly. They weren't on a line or anything, but it was like going through Devils games. I kept noticing Miles Wood, and it's just funny how much better it made me feel about Miles Wood. Because I already felt great about Tomas Tatar.
They share similar ice. It makes you feel a little bit better about Wood standing, but now I'm concerned about Tatar. So I'm kidding.
They moved to the middle, right?
Yeah, it's quite literally middle.
I like Miles Wood.
I do too.
We do too.
All right.
I like Tatar more.
I don't like 6 years, but I like Miles Wood. But yeah.
I mean, let's start with the New Jersey conversation with Tatar. He comes from a system that was high octane, to say the least, last year. Mm-hmm. You feel pretty confident about the ability for that to translate to Colorado. Realistic expectations on where he slots in. Is this a guy who could function in the Avs top six? Is this really a third line scorer? Where do you see him?
Go ahead.
Well, it's interesting because I do think middle six projection is completely appropriate because I could see him being elevated to something of a second line role. But what I wanted to talk about on the whole, and Tomas Tatar is a huge part of this, is a certainty that I feel so much more comfortable with the Avs top nine that wasn't present last year, even before
100%.
we bring into the discussion injuries. We were looking at, in camp, a second line made up of potentially Alex Newhook, Evan Rodriguez, and Alex Galchenyuk. And in knowing that that was how the Avs started the season before injuries came into play, I just feel so much more comfortable that this top nine, whether that means Tatar's playing on a second line or a third line, whether Drouin is on a first line or a third, it is a top nine made up of players who are meant to play those roles that I feel so much more comfortable with that I hadn't previously at the start of last year. And I think that that's going to be a distinction that we talk a lot about in this show, that even though a lot of these players might be put in different positions, Tatar included, there is a lot more comfort with how they're going to be utilized compared to what we were looking at last year. And it's why I'm really excited about this edition. And I can't wait to talk about the many different ways this is such a good value for Colorado, such a great stylistic fit, but overall, I am projecting him in the middle six with the potential to play in the top six.
It's
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's stark when you look at the statistics, and this is maybe unfair to an Alex Newhook who doesn't have that long of a career, but you look at Ross Colton and Tomas Tatar as a potential third line, and you go, that's 2 20-goal scorers on the Avs' third line. That's a big difference than what they were going into the season with last year.
Oh, totally agree. Totally agree. And I agree with Megan, too. You're talking about top six there, or whatever, middle six, sorry. But I think what we're learning is patience is a virtue sometimes. And I think that, CMAC and the group there were smart enough to wait. Well, also put in a position to wait, actually, you know what I mean, with the cap situation and everything. And it's very similar, like everyone's saying, to Rodriguez, right? You kind of try to find some value there. But on the flip side of things, if you're Tatar, it's pretty exciting. You're coming in to play with the likes of who knows where he's going to end up playing. But still, you got Cale Makar on the ice with you on the back end. I mean, it's pretty. If you're a guy that's betting on yourself, so to speak, and I know he's older, but he's 1 year out of $1.5 million, kind of taking a risk, sort of. I'm sure he had different offers, but this one was probably the most that made the most sense for him to be able to get on the ice with guys like even on the power play. I mean, you might see him on the power play with who knows. I don't know what the combination is going to be, but you're right. Really, he has a proven record. Yep. That is a proven card, and then we'll talk about him. I'll let AJ talk a little more, but I mean, we can dig a little deeper on him as a whole in his career so far.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We do have a graphic of the Avs roster. Take this with a grain of salt. Obviously, guys are going to get it moved around, but if you watched earlier in the summer, you saw this graphic. You can pretty easily slot in Tomas Tatar in that third line wing spot, and then the defensive spot is for now Jack Johnson. We'll see. We'll talk a little bit more about that spot tomorrow, probably. There you have Tatar in the lineup. Is it that easy, AJ, to just drop him in on the third line to start, or is this guy really competing for a second line role or something like that?
Well, so going through the last couple of years of his career, you saw his ice time had dropped from that of a high-end second line guy to more of a true middle six, right there on that line between second and third line minutes.
Yep.
His even strength time is not enormous every night.
Yep.
And he played about 15 minutes a night last year while being a regular on a power play unit. So you are talking about a guy that you should temper the expectations of, like, if he's going to play next to McKinnon every night, you probably don't love that. That's probably not ideal. But a guy that if he gets put there would be fine. But I think just where his role is now, where he is in his career, is probably best in that middle six. And to speak to Eric's point about it's a great opportunity for him, we've also seen this in the last couple of years, because there are 3 guys who have come into Colorado in the last handful of years,
come out with a nice contract,
and walked out with the biggest contracts of their careers in Burakovsky, Kadri, and
Erod now, yeah.
Evan Rodriguez, who was last year's signing. And, the 2 of those guys came via trade. But Evan Rodriguez coming in last year and getting a 4-year deal out of Florida as a result of it.
Well, and I think Kadri's a little bit different, but Burakovsky was a guy who was underutilized in Washington as well.
Exactly. And those guys walked in and had career years. Their playing style was an obvious fit in Colorado, and they popped off. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say that Tatar's position was probably diminished, one, because of the postseason performance, which we'll get to,
yeah.
But also because he was 32 going into a market that didn't have a ton of money to spend. And if you're a team looking to make a meaningful upgrade to your team, you're trying to get a guy that's really going to be a dude that kind of changes the mix for you. A 30-year-old Tomas Tatar is not really that guy. And him coming into Colorado and to potentially be a second or third line wing, he's like the last guy in your top 9 that you add.
Option, yeah.
That is exactly the kind of job he needed to be getting, but that's the kind of job that was not going to pay very well in this particular market. So a 1-year deal in a place that has proven to get quality out of guys that don't need top minutes, that aren't playing a ton of minutes every night, and they can turn around and say, hey, he's probably, if he has a good year this year, going into the market next year, he puts himself in position to get probably the last meaningful contract of his career.
Yep.
And that's a great position, because you're going to have a guy that is really motivated, but he fits in with your style. He fits in on your roster in terms of what role you're asking of him. It's really hard to find. I wasn't so into the idea of it because I didn't think he would take the money that he would have had to take.
And he took it.
And yeah, he got to the end of the summer, and instead of because there's no doubt somebody had a $2 or $3 million offer somewhere
for 1 year for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For something like that. But when you look at it's funny because I was working on something over the weekend where I was going through old Avalanche games, and one of them was game 1 of round 1 against Nashville in the Cup run year.
Yeah.
You guys remember Andrei Burakovsky was on the third line?
Yep. He played a lot on the third line throughout that playoff run and the end of that season.
He opened their third line opened of Andrei Burakovsky, JT Compher, and Nicolas Aube-Kubel. Compare that to what we just had on the graphic a few minutes ago of
Colton,
Miles Wood, Ross
Tatar.
Colton, and Tomas Tatar. Which third line is better?
I think they're probably pretty similar.
Burakovsky's probably the
Better than
best,
Tatar,
probably the best player of those. But
Wood is certainly better than Knack.
Wood is a major upgrade over Nicolas Aube-Kubel. And I think Ross Colton and JT Compher are very comparable, albeit do it in different ways, but similar impact of player.
The homer in me wants to believe Colton can be better in Colorado.
Yeah, without needing 22 minutes a night and playing next to Mikko to get to a 50-point number like JT did. But yeah, you compare those third lines and you say they're pretty comparable. And what was the one thing we talked about last year of Colorado's depth really let them down? And obviously injuries played a huge role in that.
Yep.
But even without injuries, the Ben Myers did not have the kind of season that he needed to have. Guys like that, it just did not. Andrew Cogliano and Logan O'Connor were third-line players. And in this roster, I mean, we don't even have Andrew Cogliano on the graphic. He should be, but he's not there.
Look, we're going to talk a lot about that last roster spot over the next week or so.
And you could, Fredrik Olofsson, Saku Menelainen, Andrew Cogliano, like
the Olofsson spot could have 6 names. In
exactly.
It, straight up. Like,
and I think that's where you look at, I think was so interesting for me. I looked at that third line and I look at this third line. And even if Tatar plays on the second line, you move guys around or whatever,
sure. You're
still looking at it and saying, that's a really, really competitive third line. And then your fourth line is whoever's in the middle, Cogliano and LOC. And it feels like it just makes the roster. I mean, how much better do you feel today knowing that Tomas Tatar is in your top 9 and Logan O'Connor is not?
Yep.
And no offense to Logan O'Connor, of course, but a guy who's best suited to probably be your fourth line guy.
Agree. It's incredible how much it affects the entire lineup of Colorado. You kind of mentioned it. And Burakovsky did a lot of moonlighting on second lines and things like that when he was here. And if you can get that out of Tatar, he doesn't have to be a second line player all the time, but on the night where he's going, he can move up to that line. He can provide some goal scoring, specifically if the Avs need some of that. I do think it's interesting. I want to get your guys' thoughts on the power play as well, because obviously Tatar has been very good on that unit for most of his career, if I'm being honest. I don't really see it on PP1. Is there room for him there, or is this a guy that's going to round out the Avs PP2 and maybe give us some hope for that unit, which is a mistake, but I'm going to have hope for it anyway?
Well, we talked about what the second power play unit has been missing for some time, and it has been a shooter. And there have been a couple guys that we've optioned there, like a Ross Colton, who also has a good shot. But could Ross Colton be better served on PP1? Where I'm getting at is I do think that no matter how you shake it, there is room for Tomas Tatar on the power play. He would be such a great fit stylistically on that second unit to be that finisher who just is the shooter. And that is what they were missing last year, and why it was a little bit a hodgepodge of things too. The second unit, you just didn't look to accomplish very much because, one, the first power play unit is so sound, but also this could make it more competitive, and now they have 2 really compelling units to put out there if they're putting Tatar on the second unit there.
And he's a shooter.
Yep.
I mean, oh boy, he's got
that backhand is
I don't want to
nasty.
compare it to Joe's wrist shot, but I'm saying his mechanics are very similar to Joe. You know what I mean? It looks like Joe. You could put a 19 jersey on it, and then, you're like, whoa, is that
passable?
Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's got the same mechanics a little bit. Listen, Joe's got the best shot ever in my book, so I'm not comparing. I'm saying he does have a lethal shot, and Megan's saying that for the power play. And you got to remember, the second unit, you always call that the crumb minutes, right? You get the crumb minutes.
Yep.
I mean, it's
40 seconds.
sometimes it's like, it's easy to get mad at those guys, but again, if you don't even get a zone entry, the puck gets out, then that's basically it. You know what I mean? And and that comes with the territory for the high salary guys too, because they need that ice, they need that time. That's how they produce. That's how they feel good about themselves. But a guy like Tatar's got to feel good about himself. He does. You can't just throw that guy in the lineup and then all of a sudden you don't use him on the power play or whatever it is. But who knows what it's going to be like. Sometimes you can see some changes in training camp too on who's going to be on the PP1 too as well, right? I mean, sometimes you can try different things. It's a lefty, it's a righty, or whatever it is that they feel better about. So we'll see what they're going to do here. But this guy can complement high-end guys. But you're right. I think we're all right. He's more suited, I think, in this lineup for a top 9, like on that third line. And I'm going to answer your question. See, I like that line better. I like that line better than the line from 2 years ago. And, I think Ross Colton's going to be a big addition. I think he's going to feel even better about himself. He's going to get probably better minutes, better quality minutes than he did in Tampa. And then I think that those two, if you combine those two, those are two big additions. You know what I mean? And I think they felt it last year in the playoffs, felt it with the injuries and the depth. And, obviously, those are guys that are going to make a big impact this year, I believe.
We're talking about the power play. What I want to know is, does this take Artturi Lehkonen off of it entirely? Because you love the puck retrieval, but now you have proven power play guys with some serious finishing ability. Tomas Tatar's worst shooting season, 11.4%.
Yep.
They specifically go and get Jonathan Duran because he is a lights-out power play player. Ross Colton might have the best one-timer on the team at this point. Like, you add these couple of guys in, you had a 3 defenseman alignment on your second power play unit.
You ain't having that anymore.
Yeah, if your top unit is Ryan Johansson, Val Nichushkin,
McKinnon, Mikko,
McCarr,
McKinnon, but
Rantanen, and McCarr. Is Artturi Lehkonen now like your first line PK guy?
You're running a second PP at that point of Druin, Colton, Tatar.
Which one of the defensemen do you take off? Are you going to really take Bowen Byram off your D?
Taves and Byram, or drop a D-man for Lehkonen?
I think it's Taves and Byram. Or
Gerard.
Or it's not Taves because you're trying to keep that number down for next year. And you put Lehkonen on it. Like, are you now in the position where you're like, we've got 11 guys we're comfortable putting on a power play?
Yeah.
And Drouin, same thing. If you're going to do the Jonathan Drouin experiment, you got to slot him in the right place. You got to put him in the right place. You got to give him the good ice. And I'm not saying he's a crybaby. That's not what I'm saying. The type of player that he is, if he's getting the crappy ice, it's not going to work. It's not. He's not a fourth line guy. He's not. So this guy's going to need some ice. He's going to need to play with guys that he can complement guys, high-end guys. So if you're doing this experiment, because it is, it's a very cheap experiment, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. But you got to give him every chance to succeed and put him in the right spot. And if he takes it, great. If he doesn't, then it wasn't that big of a cost, right? Obviously.
And with Duran, especially, we're talking about the second power play unit with Duran as a high-end playmaker, creativity guy, a guy that can get a puck through a seam, through several sticks. You now have a guy other than Ross Colton. He had the big one-timer on that unit. Now you have Tomas Tatar as well as a quality proven finisher. Two guys that he can find and reliably get finishing quality out of. Now, we're talking about Tatar in this. I will say Tatar has not scored on the power play very much the last couple of years. It's been like more of like a secondary, maybe even tertiary role for him. Because those New Jersey teams ended up with some...
They had a lot of pretty good dudes.
They ended up with some pretty good players on it by the end there. But, we know he can do that. He's got an entire career that shows... he has 7 20-goal seasons.
Yep.
The guy can score. And again, his worst shooting season is 11.4%.
Pretty good.
Yeah, that's really good as a worst season for a not elite player. That's a really good number. So you're talking about somebody that's proven, he's reliable, he can slot in a lot of different areas, but he's not reliant on the power play production. I think Drouin is going to be a guy who really needs power play points to really kind of fulfill the full level of promise that he provides. Tatar can do a lot of his work at even strength.
And that was a lot of that is what shapes up some quality middle six, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not always going to get the special teams time that the top guys might get. So if he can be effective, look, he had a 48-point season last year. If he repeats that, the Avs would take it all the way to the bank. Like,
how bad was 2016-17 that you said 48-point season and I flinched?
No, this is one player
Yeah,
that had 48 points.
Just that one guy. You said it and I just flinched, man. I was like, oh my God.
Sure.
On that note, if you're thinking about 16-17, you might need to get yourself some Breckenridge Distillery whiskey. Go check them out if you haven't. They have a bunch of amazing different alcohols, but their whiskey has won a ridiculous amount of awards. So go get it. Give it a try today, and you will most likely love it. They are doing a couple of giveaways, which you can go check out right now. First of all, they're having 2 competing Broncos whiskeys. They have Ed McCaffrey's and then Alfred Williams's as well. So you can go vote on which one you like better over at BreckenridgeDistillery.com/Bourbon of Denver Broncos. And then the big one, they are giving away 2 tickets to the Broncos game on New Year's Eve, where you can be in the Breckenridge Distillery suite. All you have to do is go to Instagram, post your favorite Broncos photos, and hashtag Broncos Bourbon, and you'll be entered to win. They'll narrow down their favorite 10 pictures on December 1st, and then there'll be a fan vote later in December. So go get your photos out there, hashtag Broncos Bourbon, get yourself into a pretty cool suite for New Year's Eve. It's going to be an absolute blast of a Broncos game. Again, go to BreckenridgeDistillery.com today to check them out. Try their whiskey, try their new vodka, give them a go. They make good stuff. Trust me, the highest distillery around.
It sounds like an awesome way to spend New Year's Eve.
No kidding.
Because like the Chargers are good, but also still the Chargers.
So
you
they'll
can
find
watch,
a way.
You can watch at least one quality team, but also know that you're in store for some really weird chaos that will cause them to lose.
Hey, one of those teams will end up with 16 points. So I just don't know which one.
Now we're fighting.
If alcohol's not your thing, maybe check out Kind Love, the OG distillery here in Colorado. They've been around since 2010. They have tons of amazing products, and you can get 25% off in-store all of their flour, gummies, their turbo sticks, everything when you use code DNVR at checkout. Go check them out if you haven't. They really do make amazing stuff. I know AJ loves their gummies. Everyone here raves about their turbo joints because they don't kid around about the turbo. We'll put it that way. 1 or 2 puffs, and you are set.
Yeah, I smoked one the other day. It was great.
There you go. It's good stuff. You got to go check it out. Anyway, get over there. You can also order online. Go to kindlove.com to see their full ordering menu. Be sure to use that DNVR code to get 25% off all in-store purchases. Multiple locations throughout the Denver metro area. You can also use that QR code on screen right there for Kind Love. Also, I got a DraftKings pick of the week for you. And really, this is just AJ's baby here. If you want to make a lot of money, wait for the Rockies to get a lead and then bet against them. Because right now, you will make many, many dollars with this. You got like plus 800 the other day?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So sometimes it pays to bet against your local sports teams. That's my DraftKings pick.
It's been tremendous for me to the point where I'm pretty sure that the betting market is on to me because last night once the Rockies took the lead, they shut the game down. They pulled it off the board for like 30 minutes, and only when they got into the 9th inning did they put it back up there, and it was like,
I'm pretty sure it's safe now.
Yeah.
Although they did blow it in the 9th the other day.
Exactly. It was very exciting.
Ooh.
Yeah, they peaked at plus 1,700 last night, so you would have lost money on that one. But
you made enough.
I've won so many bets doing that over the last month and a half.
They're getting to 100 losses, right? Like
Yeah.
it's happening. Also, a bet you can take.
If they had even a bad bullpen and not a ghastly, like astronomically embarrassing one,
It wouldn't be 100.
It wouldn't even be
losses.
close. They wouldn't have even. It would have been like a 92 loss season. So
Tough out here.
keep playing Jake Bird. See what happens.
There you go. Go bet against the Rockies over at DraftKings. Get your pick of the week in. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.sot1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NEW YORK or text HOPE-NEW YORK. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. I think that's Ontario. See sportsbook.draftkings.com for terms and eligibility conditions, etc. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. Two more things I wanted to cover on Tatar. One, a lot of his defensive underlines actually pretty good. I was a little bit surprised by that. And as someone who was like calling for Tatar 2 years ago when he was a free agent on the market, I did not expect to see numbers that good on his defensive end. Is this a guy you could consider for the PK? Or is this more of a, hey, let him be dominant at 5-on-5?
I'll jump in and I'll say something I don't want to say. I'll say something nice about the Detroit Red Wings.
I'm leaving.
You always got to remember, so Tatar's a draft pick, right? Second round, Red Wings. Always remember Detroit drafts well, especially in those years back. You know, I'm talking about when Tomas Tatar got drafted. They drafted always high IQ players. All their players ended up, I mean, the list is, you know, from Yarncroc to guys like that maybe didn't play for them. I mean, of course Tatar did, but their number one quality is that their IQ was really high. They're hockey players first and foremost. So Tomas Tatar knows how to play hockey. And then he was molded the right way in the Detroit system. Even back then, they were taking their time at that time. And he did place first 3 years in the American League. In the American League, he did score 20-plus, I want to say, each season. I don't have it in front of me, but he did score goals in the American League. So this guy can play. This guy can play in all three zones. And you got to remember, the Avalanche are a winning franchise in a sense that they won the Cup. What is it, 12 months, 14, 15 months ago, right?
Neener.
Right, you know what I mean? And then, so you're bringing in guys. You're not going to bring in guys that can't bring their game to. You got to play a 200-foot game to play in this league and to win in this league. And there's a certain way to play, and the Avs have found it. And again, that's why I raised my hat to the coaching staff last year, losing all they had, all the players they had, and they were playing with a very depleted lineup at times, and to go and win the division was pretty amazing. You know, so you're talking about coaching there, Nolan Pratt and Ray Bennett and Bedsy and everybody. They do a good job. So for them to come in there, for Tatar to come in this lineup, you got to remember, you got to trust the way you play hockey, and he does play hockey the right way. Yeah. So he does. And I think that looking back at it, he did the right thing by going into the American League. It formed, you know, his career. This is a guy that was traded for first, a second, and a third to Vegas not too long ago, right, in the inaugural season. And you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it was a bad one. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I was covering the Knights that year on TV, so I can easily talk about like kind of what I think happened there. I think he came in. It was in the weirdest situations. You got to remember that group was real tight. The Misfits, right? They had that group text, and I think James Neal had started it with the Misfits, and guys were really tight. And then nobody expected them to do well, and they did. And then, you know, I don't remember when the trade was, but it was, I want to say, more towards the trade deadline. So the guys are tight, and then all of a sudden, you're not giving up a player on the roster, but you're giving up a lot of assets for him. And then he comes in, and he really had no identity, meaning like in their lineup. They didn't know where to put him. It was the weirdest thing. And this guy came in, and he was making, 5.5 at the time, and this is a bona fide 20-plus goal scorers. I mean, I think he scored 29 one year in Detroit. So he comes in there, and they didn't know where to put him. And I think this is the real, like, there might have been a little bit of a disconnect between George McPhee and Gerard Gallant there on, you know, maybe going to get that player. And sometimes you'll ask your coaches, like, hey, what about this guy? And they're, oh, yeah, I could use him. You know what I mean? I don't know if it was ever communicated, but I think he got in there. They didn't know where to put him. And whether it was on the power play or this, which led to obviously going in the playoffs and then being a healthy scratch, which was, I mean, it's kind of absurd when you think about it. You give up a first, a second, and a third
To
for
not
a guy.
play a
It's
guy.
a lot,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
tough.
like especially a new franchise. And but the one thing I'll tell you guys and everybody listening, like, and I witnessed it because I was on the press box every game, and I think it speaks about the character of this guy. Was he never said a word, he never complained once. He had a smile on his face, like, and he made it known to the coach, because I was like, is he smiling right now because he just doesn't care and doesn't want to play, right? Because there's a happy medium there, right? But no, he made it clear to the coaching staff that he was very disappointed he's not playing, but he wasn't going to be a distraction. Obviously, with the story that they've had, you know, so far I've had at that time. But I tell you, you're a healthy scratch in the plaster. And I think that's where his, like, postseason, like, oh, he can't play in the
We'll get to that.
postseason.
We'll
Get to
yeah.
that. And then I think that it got to that. And I think that his character, for me, listen, it's tough to be a scratch. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not fun. And if you think it's fun and you're happy with it, then you should quit, right? You know what I mean? Because it's time for you to move on. You know what I mean? Because you should always be mad. It doesn't matter what level. But there's a way to be mad and there's a way to be a distraction. This guy was a pro. And again, I'm not saying that we want him to be a healthy scratch here. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about his character that I saw firsthand, and I thought that was a big thing. And I always stuck with me. And then after that, I felt that he was just, we'll get to that, but maybe wrongly, typecast about his playoff performance.
I think it's a couple of things. For me, it's not a firm no that he would appear on the penalty kill, but I would imagine him being maybe the second group out instead of the first. And for a couple of reasons, it comes down to that roster spot at the bottom of the lineup that is yet to be filled.
Fair.
And I think that this is where Maenalainen, am I saying that right, would be perhaps one of the front runners for that spot because of the penalty kill experience. And it's for a couple of reasons. It's not that the defensive metrics for Tatar are bad by any means. I just don't know that that's a strength of his game. I think he makes smart decisions away from the puck. They're already extracting so much value in getting him very likely on the power play somewhere. And if they are going to be moving him throughout the top 9 at 1.5, I just don't think you can complain about that. And I think the forwards that they have suited for the penalty kill now are just more appropriate to do it. That just wasn't really the role that Tatar had in New Jersey and teams prior to this as well. It's not to say that he never made any appearances. They were just a bit more fleeting compared to LOC, who is now accustomed to how the Avs want to penalty kill, because at times, and it works some of the time, LOC being a huge component of this, they have this sort of aggressive transitional approach that they also want to seek those scoring opportunities. Yep. That's not necessarily something that Tatar couldn't do, but it requires adjustment. And for that reason, Cogliano, LOC remain some of the top forwards that I would slot in on the penalty kill. And then beyond that is a Maenalainen going to be a player that is on the fourth line because of the penalty kill specialty that he has in his tool bag. That's sort of where I'm at, because I just don't get the feeling that they brought Tomas Tatar in to be a penalty killer. Otherwise, I think they would have sought someone out who has that as their specialty. I think he was brought in for a different reason. And so I wouldn't necessarily be most comfortable with him being the guy at the front of that to go out on the penalty kill. Maybe the second group out.
A problem we talked about a lot earlier in the offseason. Tatar's not taking any face-offs for you on the penalty kill. But
and to build off that point of like, that's not what he was brought in to do. What he was brought in to do was be on a power play unit somewhere.
Yep.
And when I asked that question earlier of, do you take Arturi Lehkonen off of it? It's
put
so that
him
you
on the
make
PK.
him
Fair enough.
the top PK guy.
Yes.
Because you do, between
love that.
Lehkonen and Nichushkin, you love the two-way game.
Yep.
You love that they can help you power play and penalty kill, but you do probably want to manage it a little bit. You don't want them on both top units. You know, you don't want them out there. You don't want them playing. I love Arturi Lehkonen. I don't want him playing 20 minutes a night.
It's probably too much.
You know, like, I don't, that's not what I'm after with him. And so I think you could maybe, when we talk about the role that he's been brought into play, you could kind of manage maybe that power play expectation for him. You know, if there's an injury or there's a guy who's not doing what he needs to be doing, of course. But assuming a forward core, like a top 9 forwards that we're talking about, are healthy on opening night, That's why I'm asking that question about Lehkonen, because I would prefer Lehkonen to be in that role. And then you have Cogliano, you have O'Connor, and then you build from there. You know, if you want to put Val Nichushkin in that role, great. We've talked about they don't have a guy to win a faceoff right now on that unit.
Yep.
Because Ryan Johansson and Ross Colton are your best faceoff guys.
But they don't PK.
But they don't. Neither one of them has a history of PK in the NHL. So, for my money, I'm asking Ross Colton to do that. If I gave him $4 million and like he's going to be on the second power play unit, he's going to be a center. If we think that he could be the 2C moving forward,
Right.
He's got to be able to chip in there.
I want to test his limitations this season, or especially through January.
Yeah.
I want to see how he handles more responsibility like that. Consistent 5v5 role, consistent line mates, which he did not have in Tampa last year. But I'm asking him to do that. I'm doing that before I'm asking Tomas Tatar to do it. And then you are talking about a Saku Menelainen. You are talking about
to round out the fifth, sixth
a
guy.
Frederick
on that
Olofsson.
PK,
Whoever ends up that roster graphic that we have with Tatar in it, whoever that last guy is, you know, you Cogliano.
Do we
LLC,
have the graphic of the like 6 guys
The
that are battling
competing-
for it
yeah,
at
the
camp?
competing
I think
guys?
we probably do, so you guys can see all the names here. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you go through this list, if you're going to make the Avalanche, you need to be on whoever wins this battle
Is PK.
needs to be able to play on the PK.
Yeah.
That gives Frederick Olofsson, Ben Myers, Andre Pavel, and Saku Menelainen a head start on all those guys.
Yep.
And especially because those are also guys who can play at center. You probably don't want Menelainen.
More of a wing, yeah.
Yeah, you probably don't want him there, but he could do it. Olofsson, the Avs
Went out and got him actively.
Well, have talked about how his positional versatility is a selling
Right.
point.
I haven't personally observed it enough to feel
Same.
comfortable putting him in the middle.
And then all the other guys on that are hard wings. Hard. Like you're not playing Tomas Tatar, Riley Tufte in the middle of the ice. You're just not.
Respectfully, no.
Yeah. So that's where I think building off Megan's point of like you're talking about roles and how these guys all fit into the overall puzzle.
Yep.
That's not something I'm asking of Tatar.
I think that's pretty valid. We'll talk a lot more about those guys over this weekend and certainly next week as training camp gets started. I want to stick to Tatar, though. Eric, 13 points in 52 playoff games for Tatar. Sell me on why you think that that can be better here.
I'll tell you why. If I go back in the American League, he won the Calder Cup, I believe. And I do believe he had like close to 20 goals and like
I think
20.
he was their leading scorer
Oh, yeah.
on the Calder Cup winning team.
Absolutely. And I know it's not the NHL. The American League is an outstanding league, and you can learn a lot about the character of a player. I'm talking about, can he do it in the playoffs? Can he do it when it matters, when it counts? So he's done it. He hasn't done it at the NHL level. I'm talking about North America. So he did it. He had a big role. Like I said, Detroit did not make the playoffs, or they did, and they were like first-round losers. And, they weren't expected much. Or, I think he was just fine. I think he was okay like the rest of their team. And then, like I said, I think he got that reputation when he got to Vegas. And then he gets to Vegas. And like I said, it's rare I take pity on a guy because you got to find a way to contribute. But he was a lost puppy. A lost puppy. He didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to put him in the lineup. And I think playoffs started and they were like, well, we can't scratch this guy. We just gave up the moon for him.
Yeah.
And then, all of a sudden it became very obvious, like, he's going to be the scratch. And I remember us talking in the press box, we're like, yeah, that's what I would do too. You know what I mean? And I think they did what they had to do. And obviously, they went all the way down to the Stanley Cup Finals, losing in 5 to Washington. But he was a non-factor, and I think it stuck with him. Then he's part of another big trade, right, that gets to Montreal. And again, those are big names again, right? Pacioretty and Suzuki, and it was a big 3-way trade. And he was, again, you're going to say, well, he was a salary dump. Well, yeah, part of it is that too as well, right? Obviously, because it didn't go well. He was making 5.5, and then you're moving contracts like Pacioretty that was making a decent amount of money at that time. You got to have a bigger. Yeah, he was making 7. There you go. So you need something that's going to fall in, and he's the one that kind of fall into it. But you know, and I do think that after that, the playoffs are a little bit in Montreal. Like, again, it was that weird year with the COVID play where Montreal, you know, again, they go
The
on
miracle
fun.
run, yeah.
And I do believe he's a scratch again, if I'm not mistaken.
You're
Again, it
correct.
was, again, Montreal that year is not even supposed to get in the playoffs, right? If you're, and again, hey, I'm a big Montreal, you know, I'm from there. I'm a big fan. You know, I mean, it was great. You know, it was awesome. But somehow, it's kind of hard to judge that year. Then he comes in, and in Jersey, yeah, I mean, he didn't really deliver. You know what I mean? So, but I think that I got to be careful, and I'm going to start being more careful from now on, yeah, but he can't do it in the playoffs. You know, I said that about Jack Eichel, you know, where, again, he never made it to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, like, you know, he was never really given an opportunity to play in the playoffs. Then he goes all the way to the finals his first time around. Now, Tatar, I just feel that for some reason, you know, it hasn't clicked for him in the playoffs, but also the leash has been short, where he hasn't really been given a lot of time to make something happen. So I'm going to say that, you know, I do believe this guy can do it, even though he hasn't done it the last few postseasons.
So a couple of things that I want to point out here on pro and con side of this about the playoff argument is he's been healthy scratched on 2 teams that went to the Stanley Cup final, and they did it without him. Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny because we've had a lot of Montreal people come into our chat over the summer and talk about how Jonathan Drouin, we shouldn't have any expectations. He's too soft. He's a head case. You know who did play in that cup run and was pretty good? It was Jonathan Drouin, while Tomas Tatar was getting healthy scratched. Yep. So it's interesting, but it's also undeniable. I mean, his points per game are less than half. He's a .58 point per game player in the regular season. It's .25 in the playoffs. Yep. It's brutally bad. He had 1 assist in 12 games for New Jersey last year. Mm-hmm. So those are like bottom line, just actual results and what has happened in his career. It's a fair conversation to have.
It is.
But the pro part of this, the part where you say, but maybe, okay, the pro part of this, I dug a little deeper. I looked at the possession metrics and the expected goals and all the fancy stats to see does the play driving disappear as well?
Sure.
Is the process going away, or is it just the small sample of playoffs? Because when you say how many games was it, like 53 or something like that?
Yep.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of playoff games. But when you do it 7, 10,
Sure.
6, whatever at a time, a lot of things can happen in 6-game samples. You know, things like that. And when you look at his expected goals, they've been very good almost every time he's been in the playoffs.
Puck just no go.
His worst performance was last postseason with New Jersey. He had a 48% expected goals, which isn't like great. 48% is below 50, which is where you want to be. But 48% is like not a big deal. What was his actual goals percentage? It's 18%. 18. His PDO. Now, keep in mind, PDO, the point of PDO is to normalize over a long period of time, but we use it as a proxy for luck. You want it to be as close to 1,000 or over 1,000 because that means things are going well for you. Tomas Tatar's PDO last year in the postseason, any guesses? If you read my piece, you already know the answer to this. It's 892.
That number not starting with a 9 is absurd.
So we consider players to be hilariously unlucky if they're in the 970 range. So for a player to be at 892 is an astronomically, almost impossibly low number. So, like, was the process not as good as you would like from it in last year's postseason with New Jersey? Absolutely. Was it that bad? Give me a break with that.
That's so the on ice goaltending would have to be like an 850, and they're shooting like 4% or something.
So he was at 5v5. He's on ice for 2 goals and 9 against. It was brutally bad, and that's hockey. Sometimes things like that just happen, which is why we don't usually use PDO in small samples like that, because they're not incredibly instructive. But they can be useful when you see an extreme outlier on either side.
Yep.
Because again, PDO is something that's to be used over a larger sample that almost always normalizes over time. But when you look at his postseason career, you look at the play driving ability that he has, offensively, defensively, those things have translated. It's the points, it's the goals. That hasn't come. That is almost as much a result of randomness as anything else. And as Eric, you mentioned earlier, some of those teams just weren't great. Like even those Montreal teams that he was on, they weren't very good hockey teams. And I am curious if he were to get into the postseason here, just, you know, you always think, I know that I'm veering into I can fix him territory, but
It's okay.
like I think you do have to wonder, the Avs have this history. They have seen
The Avs
guys.
have fixed some dudes. Yeah.
The Avs have had success doing this exact kind of thing. And I just want to say I'm open to the idea of it, but I would also understand if the Avs were to make a deep postseason run and he's a healthy scratch, it probably has more to do with the fact that Nikolai Kovalenko is here.
Another valid point that the Avs will have. They were always going to have some interesting decisions come that time of the season, but now with the addition of Tatar, it gets even more muddled of who's going to end up in the lineup.
When Kovalenko gets here, if Tomas Tatar ends up on if their third line going into round one is Tomas Tatar, Ross Colton, and Nikolai Kovalenko, they're winning the Stanley Cup.
That's pretty nasty.
I think you all raise really interesting points about why context in the postseason matters. And some of it is, like you mentioned, the games being spaced out in bursts. He hasn't played more than 12 playoff games in a single stretch. And so they are handfuls of 6 here, 7 there. The longest stretch of games that he played was in the Calder Cup winning year, 24 games, and he had 21 points, 16 goals. And so that continued use, again, at the American League level, shows that there was some success. Even in looking at Eichel in the playoffs last year, I feel like second round or in beyond is where you really start to saw Eichel take true playoff form.
Yeah.
And if they hadn't gotten past the first round, would we have ever seen playoff Eichel realized?
Yep.
And so with Tatar, I wonder very similar things. And some of it's different because he's been scratched in later rounds of playoffs, so it's a slightly different conversation. But Tatar over a longer stretch in the playoffs isn't something we've really gotten to see beyond that Calder Cup winning year. And so I'm curious to see then what it would look like with more continued use in the playoffs. And then the other conversation is being in a group with guys who have made it across the finish line, I think is something that shouldn't be understated.
Bingo.
I think the
Such a good
mentality
point.
of
Yep.
winning and being along players who've done it before is why a team like Seattle, though a young group, had some players who had seen deeper playoff success in the lineup. And I think it's why their depth was as successful as it was last year, that despite being such a new team. And that's what I think Colorado has as an advantage. Even in a player like Ross Colton, who has seen
Did it in
postseason
Tampa,
success with Tampa potentially being Tatar's line mate, I think is a mentality that is going to be really helpful to Tatar, and why I think there is room to entertain that he could be more successful in the playoffs than we've previously seen.
I think the Colton thing there is extremely key to it, especially because we've talked about, look, really his underlying numbers are pretty good on the defensive side. The giving up 9 goals in that playoff series doesn't accurately represent the way he's capable of playing. Mm-hmm. And if you give him a Ross Colton that maybe can pick up some of that slack in the playoffs on the production side, all you're asking him to do is not lose you games.
Right.
Not that hard to do when you have a bunch of good players around you.
It's a small sample. Your goalie stinks up the joint, right? You know, all of a sudden gives up 4 or 5 bad ones, and of your 9. And so those numbers are, you know, and there's also the health issues. You'll never know. I mean, I know we get the, oh, this guy played with a torn labrum and he's out 6 months now. But, you know, there's a lot of those nagging injuries. You got to remember at the end of the season like that, sometimes you're dealing with stuff. And he might have been dealing with stuff in some of those series that, you know, he didn't really produce much. And if you're a shooter and, I don't know, you got a rib injury and, you know, it can, I mean, it hinders you. You're just not the same player, you know.
Can I just ask real quick at the end of season, how often were you healthy going into a postseason? I guess just at the end of a regular season, how often were you healthy?
I got to be honest with you, I don't think you're ever healthy. Like, it's just like every game there's something. It's a long year, and for a guy to tell you like, oh, I feel great, I'm 100, they're lying to you. Like it's 100%. There, you got something going on. It's 82 games plus training camp, all the mileage and the flights and the time zones. And I'm talking about in the West, you go play in the East, it's easy. It's a cupcake league. You know, you're in your bed at night. It's 11:30. It's great. You know, it's awesome. But in the West, it's a little different. I haven't lived both, you know, but you're never feeling great. And that's why I tell sometimes like young kids or, you know, junior kids or, it's like, oh, I don't feel, my, you know, this hurts. And I'm like, well, I mean, it hurts
Tough,
or you're injured. Like, it's a big difference. And like, you know, so you're never going to really feel good. I'll use my wife, for example. Like I remember she'd tell me like, oh, come on, suck it up. You know, I'd be like, well, you stand up, you run into the cement wall over there, 100 miles an hour, and you get back up, and then you come back, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. And that's what sometimes a game feels like for you know, a bottom of the lineup guy. And they're car accidents, they're car crashes.
Do it 160 straight days and tell me how you feel.
Yeah, that's, you know, so it's like, I'm not making fun of it. I'm just saying it's reality. No, it's reality. Like you're just, you know, the Avs ran out of gas last year. 100% in my book, they ran out of gas, you know, and then it was a short summer. You're not able to train the way you're supposed to and the way your body's accustomed to. But now you're dealing with injuries. So now it's even shorter because you're getting some sort of surgery. So, I mean, somehow injuries play a role. So, so to get back to Tatar, like, I don't know. We don't know. There was no, you know, we'll never know if it really was, you know, really not feeling well. And those are things that when you make a trade or you go get a guy, and I think the Avs have done a great job, you know, for a long time now, is you do your homework on the people. Tatar is a guy that they've been, you know, obviously in Vegas and then in Montreal. I mean, those guys like Garth Joy used to be right there in Ottawa. I've seen Montreal probably play every game. I mean, in Vegas, you had Dan LaPerriere that probably, you know, saw him play all the time in Vegas. I mean, at the end of the day, those guys do their homework. You know about the press box. That's how you kind of talk about it. And I think I don't think you're saying like I don't know how you said it earlier, but like, oh, you're trying to fix everyone, you know. But it's like somehow you're like, all right, maybe, you know, he can work for us, you know.
Well, and if you don't believe that he can, you're not going to go get him.
Or
you're just not going to spend that $1.5 million because you're like, well, it'll be great for 82 games. Like, you have to have some level of belief that he's going to work here. He's going to fit. They don't need him to be a star. They just need him to kind of work.
If you just believe in everything that's out there, then you never trade for Jack Eichel. Right? I'm just saying, right?
True.
I'm just being honest, right? So you got to be convinced in your own staff, your own opinion, and you know, I'm sure that Tatar, you know, obviously like all of us here, we all know he's been a healthy scratch. Well, I mean, in multiple teams, right? You know, so you know it's been brought up, so you know it's been talked about, and then why is that? You know. So it'll be interesting.
And look, the ace in the hole here is they're paying him $1.5 million. So if that dude puts up 30 points for $1.5 million, you're happy, right?
Well, this is the other element of it is we talked so long. All season we were like, oh, the Avs are going to have to do the Evan Rodriguez thing again.
And they did.
Talked about it all summer. Jonathan Duran, Tomas Tatar. Those are 2 of your top 9 guys. $2.325 million you have spent on those 2 guys.
Pretty efficient.
You've put yourself, from a roster building perspective, you have put yourself into a position to feel really damn good about your forward core if healthy. It won't be. You know that there will be injuries, but that's where that graphic with all the names and stuff. That's where those guys all come in. The fact that we are having a Saku Menelainen conversation and not a, I don't know, pick an AHL guy from this year kind of conversation, you know, like we're not having that. We're talking about like fringe NHLers being appropriately at the bottom of the lineup and not Dennis Malgin, not in the NHL this year, being a top 6 guy for you in a game 7. Tough. It's a huge difference from what the lineup, you compare the lineup in game 7 that they lost with in a game that they probably should have won, a game that they outplayed Seattle in. And despite that, they still lose that. But you look at that lineup versus the lineup that they're going to ice on opening night, and I don't know how you walk out of it feeling like the Avs have not had a really, really solid summer.
Yep.
Because the Tatar thing felt like it was the bow. You've already built you've got the present, you got everything ready to go. It's wrapped up. It's all ready to be given. But now you've got the bow on top of it. It's perfect. This is as close to perfect as you could have asked for.
Yep. It's in a great spot. If you're looking on the bright side, make sure you get your Shady Rays. Go to shadyrays.com. Use code DNVR when you check out. If you get 2 pairs or more, you get 50% off your entire order. They make a great product, dozens of different styles, something for everybody. They've been given 5 stars by over 250,000 people. So they are great sunglasses for an affordable price. And the best part is, in the first 30 days, if you lose them, break them, or just don't like them, they will replace them for completely free. So they've got you covered. Go check them out at shadyrays.com today, or they have a brick and mortar in the Park Meadows Mall. If you're local, be sure to use that DNVR code. And then go play some sports of your own. I don't know what your underlyings look like in kickball, but I hope they're good with Volo, the largest social sports company in the world. What?
You ever done that? You ever gone to like a men's league or a rec league and like kept stat tracked
I've
for fun?
never once done that.
My old roommate played in a rec hockey league, and I used to go keep track of her Corsi for her.
Was she good? Okay, we'll leave it at that.
It wasn't like a nightmare.
Go check it out if you haven't. They have a monthly membership program that gives you unlimited access to sports, events, and social activities every single night. For $20 a month, the Volo membership gives you unlimited pickups, drop-ins, and tournaments, or you can pay $200 a year for the whole thing. If you're not sure, you can try it with their beta version, which is just $10 a month for 3 months. It's a great deal to get in on a ton of the action. A bunch of us here are playing pickleball, and I already mentioned kickball. They have other sports too, whatever you're into: bowling, volleyball, soccer, football if you're European. I don't. They have flag football too. I can't think of them all, but they have literally every sport that you can think of. They also are all over the city, including Lodo, Rhino, Uptown, City Park, the Highlands, Sloan's Lake, Cherry Creek, DU, Inglewood, Arvada, Aurora, Northfield, and more. Their fall leagues are now open, so be sure to sign up before it's too late. And when you do sign up, use code DNVR10 to get $10 off at www.volosports.com/Denver. Get over there today. Get in on some sports. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. We talked a lot about Tatar. We've talked a good bit about that side of the lineup. Some other news here is we'll go to Megan on this one. Obviously, rumors have been swirling about Pavel Francouz being questionable for a bit now. It sounds like things are not great.
Well, and the best way to frame it is to tamper expectation, is especially to the people who are listening. We're talking about how this lineup is going to shake out come opening night. And it's just examining what we do know, and that is that he had the procedure on the abductor at the end of last year. That had been something that had been troubling at the end. As recently as around August 18th, was not taking shots. And then in knowing these things and what we gather behind the scenes, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying he'd be ready come opening night. And to tamper expectations then in that case and look towards maybe a Justus Annunen being somebody that we see a lot in preseason, certainly was going to be the expectation anyways. But in seeing who they got in Arvid Holm too, a young, promising goaltender on the uptick, that could be somebody that I think the Avs took interest in for a specific reason as well because of those things. So just looking towards maybe some uncertainty in net, but obviously the upside of that being Georgiev is the guy, and everything that we learned from last year pointing towards that is an optimistic note to start the season on. But just in seeing that he hasn't gotten on the ice there in these captain skates too since he was last on it in mid-August, it's just not an encouraging sign for people to keep in mind as we head towards October.
I think we'll probably talk more about this later this week when we get into conversations about rookie camp, and we're going to spend a lot of this weekend on prospects while we're out in Vegas. P.S. We're going to be out in Vegas.
Yep.
So I don't want to get too far into it right now, but like, you have to think the Avs are pretty comfortable with Justus Annunen as their
three and a half, whatever.
Yeah, if Frankie's not good to go, you have to think that Ananen is that there's some level of comfortable with Ananen, knowing that they've been a really big fan of him, that he's been one of the, I don't know, like top 10 or 15 goalie prospects over the last couple of years, that they've waited for him to kind of do the thing. And now with Frankie's in his last year, he's once again dealing with another round of injury issues of, we don't know the severity. We aren't even like, we'll see, right? Like we'll find out when camp opens more information about his status. But I think on paper, the plan should be Justus Ananen is your backup next season. Like you sign him, he's on your NHL roster. That's the plan, right? And if they're maybe a year early on that, I think they're prepared for that. And that is where an Arvid Holm as your number one guy in Loveland with the Eagles, you're comfortable with that. But I do think that I love Frankie. Like, he's such a great dude that I hope he's okay. I hope it's not whatever ails him, I hope is all good. But I do think that this is one of those ones where the Avs are in a position, if something happens to Ananen or Georgiev, like now you're having like a very different conversation. But I think with Justus there, it's not a blessing, but like
as a guy they've been targeting for the potential future backup job
like,
anyway.
This is kind of the plan. It just might be a little accelerated if Frankie is in real trouble.
In the case of Ananen, it is almost a trial of like, hey, go out there, play good while Frankie's hurt, and you're probably the backup next year for real.
Right, and like we don't go do the Keith Kincaid thing this season because we trust you.
Right.
So it's a big opportunity for him if Frankie is slated to miss some time, which obviously is speculative at this point. I'm just saying, like, Ananen, it's a big opportunity for a guy that you kind of want to give the job to eventually.
If he can take it.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
In seeing that this has been a lingering problem for Francouz too, I think wanting to make sure that he is fully healthy before giving him the green light to play is of the utmost importance. So without even knowing what his status is or how close to return he would be, I think there's just a lot of caution on the Avs side surrounding Frankie because of his injury history, that at the beginning of this season, they can afford some luxuries in giving players like Justus Ananen a look, Arvid Holm. And then for the benefit of Trent Miner, who has been buried with the Grizzlies for so long but has had decent AHL stints, could this be an opportunity for him to get something of a promotion and some ice time in Loveland? I think it would be wonderful for Miner's development specifically if there is sort of this trickle-down effect in giving players like that opportunity at the start of the year.
There's always, if you're not comfortable, there's always the waiver wire.
That's a great
Listen,
point.
I'm not a big waiver wire guy, but unless you're a player and you want to get picked up. But
So the Avs have been really aggressive with the waiver wire. What do you mean you're not a big waiver wire guy?
No. What I'm saying is I'm not saying you can plan on because you never know what's going to be on. You can assume you can plan. I mean, goalie-wise is probably the easiest one. If you look at all the
start of the year, you're going to see 10 goalies get sent down.
Yeah. So the goalie one's an easy one because you know that, they're keeping, I don't know, use LA, Copley,
Cam Talbot.
And you know that big save Dave Rittich is probably going down. Right? I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Miss me with Big Save Dave, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, that's his nickname. I'm using the nickname.
Round one, game one, it was no save Dave.
No. Well, you know what I'm saying. I just used LA. So you know that one of them's going through the wires. And I'm saying, forget about Rittich, but there is a guy like that on each team. Everybody protects themselves, right, with the third guy. And I look at the Avs last year with, JoJo, right? The next thing but then he gets picked up, and then there's all those rules, right? If you take him, you got to put him on your roster. But again, the Avs, if they ever took a goalie, they would put him on the roster. So you know what I mean. So they're not keeping him around as a third guy, and there's three guys on the roster. But so they would take him, and then of course, Ananen could go down the minors, and but.
The money would be an interesting element of that as well.
You have to look, and there's a lot that go into factors.
Just in this hypothetical world where Francouz is not healthy for opening night, which again, I want to stress is speculative at the moment. Like, we just don't know.
How do you free up that space? Is it bad enough that he could go on LTIR?
If it's on LTIR, it's not a big deal. Right. If it's regular IR, you're having to make choices, and that I think that becomes a lot more. To be honest with you, if it's like the first 2 weeks of the season, I'm putting him on LTIR, and I'm just
You're
telling
just
him
riding
tough.
it, yeah.
Because I'm taking those 24 guaranteed days, and I'm either giving it to Ananen at the beginning of the season, or I am claiming somebody, and then that guy. But the only hesitation that I would have with the claim is if Frankie at some point does get healthy. Say it is only a month and not 6 months. He gets healthy, then what?
You have an extra guy.
Yeah, because you send that guy through waivers again, but you're
getting picked back up by whoever.
yeah, you're really hoping he gets picked up to be like, okay, now we don't have this
Well,
log.
depending on his salary, right? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
On top of it, too.
Correct. Yeah, if it's over the million, whatever the limit is, I think it's like 1.125 this year. If it's over that, you're not taking that guy.
No.
So we do have some news for us as well. Obviously, AJ already spoiled. We're going to Vegas this weekend for the rookie tournament, so we're going to have a ton of content coming for you, videos, written pieces, all that stuff. But that will change our podcast schedule a little bit while we are in Vegas. Most of our shows are going to be at around 8 p.m. Mountain Time.
Yeah. In that range.
Except for on Saturday, which we're still nailing things down, but we think we're going to have a pretty cool show Saturday afternoon. So keep your eyes out for that one.
Just an inkling you'll want to tune in.
Yeah. And then before we leave, which is tomorrow's show, we'll be doing a show probably around noon, maybe 11. We're interviewing Sam Malinsky down at FSC for the first day of rookie camp for Colorado. I know Chad has been popping off about Malinsky all show, so you could actually
off season,
Yeah,
man.
no kidding.
There's some nicknames already in there.
Yeah, Samal.
Samal?
Yeah, I saw that one. So hopefully you guys will tune in for that. A bunch of cool content coming your way. Yeah, it's going to be a fun couple of days here.
Welcome to the new world of the DNVR Avalanche podcast, where we will be regularly welcoming people onto the pod.
Yep.
But people as in like Avalanche players specifically.
Just random people.
Yeah, we're gonna go out on Colfax and pull a couple of them.
So bear with us on the time. Some of the pods might be at weird hours, but lots of cool stuff coming your guys' way. And once we get into training camp past this weekend, 2 p.m. like today is going to be our new podcast time. So expect to start seeing us a lot through training camp at around this time of day.
Do we have the graphic for tomorrow? No? Okay. I wasn't sure.
It'll be on Twitter.
Yeah, you'll see it.
Yep. So go check it out. I think that's it for today. We're going to wrap this one up. We've gone pretty long. So we appreciate all of y'all hanging out with us. We'll be back tomorrow live from Avs Rookie Camp Day 1. Tune in then, and we will see you there.